Good morning and welcome to James Bond Radio 30 Days of Spectre. This is day number 4, and today, what are we going to be talking about, Tom?
We today are going to be talking about M, everybody's favourite grumpy boss of everybody's favourite spy. Are you excited?
I'm super excited. I was so happy when they brought M back in Skyfall, not just because they brought M back, but because they got Ralph Fiennes playing him, who is an immense actor, so good. And the way he portrays M, he gets him. He's nailed it. And we've got some old school Bernard Lee type M, and it's beautiful to see that. Yeah. Absolutely beautiful to see.
I'm very excited about it. Now, I tell you what, when he was first announced, obviously, you know, we've had M with Judi Dench for a while, but it's different. It's a different relationship. It really is. And when you read the books and stuff, and you see the sort of the relationship between Bond and the old admiral that was Sir Miles Messervy and all that kind of stuff, and it's like M was the only man that Bond really respected. Do you know what I mean? Everybody else got taken for a run around the block, like Q with his gadgets, for example. Yeah. M is the only one who can put 007 in his place. Do you know what I mean? And it was I was so excited to see that come back. I must admit, I was disappointed that he's Gareth Mallory and not Sir Miles Messervy. I thought, if this is his reboot, this is where we meet Sir Miles. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But I don't think Ralph Fiennes is old enough to be a Sir Miles Messervy. Do you know what I mean? I think you need somebody who's, much, grey, for example, and a lot sort of older. But with that said, I love that he's an ex-SAS man, and he's, he can obviously handle himself. I love that sort of backstory, and I love just the way he sort of looks at Bond, like he doesn't take any shit, and I like it.
No, at all.
I think I'm very happy with his casting, and I came to a realization as well that he is going to get better the older he gets, man. Like, when he's done his 5th Bond film down the line, when he's proper starting to look a bit crusty and old, he's going to be even better, man. He's just going to improve every time we see him.
That's so funny you said that, because literally, I think it was the last viewing, or it might even be the second viewing, I was watching him in Spectre going, I can't wait to see you in like 5, 6, 7 films time. And hopefully I can really see him lasting the distance. Judi, God bless her, she was with us for ages, wasn't she?
Yeah.
From what was it, 95
to 2012. Yeah.
So, which was, in fact, that was even longer than Bernard Lee, I think, wasn't it?
So Bernard Lee would have been 62 to 79.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't make me do maths on the fly, man, because I always fail. So I'll leave that up to you.
All right. Well, I think it's pretty much the same. If not, then
right. I'm going to get my calculator out, because we can't make a statement like that without providing the answer. So 1979.
Yeah, that's 17 years.
1962. Oh, bollocks. 1962.
17 years.
17 years. Yeah. 2012 minus 1995.
17 years.
Is 17 years. It was the same.
Yeah, there we go. So imagine if we've got Ralph Fiennes for 17 years. That'd be awesome. Well, we've already had him for a couple, but, But yeah, I love, the thing is, what you said about Miles Messervy, that character almost seems like a bit of a pencil pusher, and I don't mean that in a nasty sense. I mean, that's kind of, he's a behind the desk type character, isn't he? Whereas Gareth Mallory, he has got that, he's been out in the field. I loved seeing it in Skyfall. I love seeing him, in the inquiry scene where he's, you can see he's in action. He's got the gun and he's almost, in that scene, you can almost tell that he thought that part of his life was over and he was going to be in the office, but you could almost see his character breathe energy when suddenly something like that happened. And we get that in Spectre as well. Obviously we'll be discussing that later on, but it's good to see him to do that. But he doesn't take any shit whatsoever from anyone. He puts Bond down. But okay, so let's talk about the first scene then. What do we think about the first scene? Aside from the fact that it is exactly what we wanted.
I know. Man, we were talking about that when in the run up to it. We were like, right, what do we want to see? Okay, we want to see the gun barrel at the beginning. We want to see a brilliant opening sequence. We want to see an amazing title sequence. And then when that closes out, I just want to see those leather double doors. I want to see M being really grumpy and pissed off at Bond and having a go at him. And when that happened and the screen sort of dissolved into the wooden desk, and the newspapers slapped down, and he's like, right, start any way you like, you know. Yeah. And you actually went, oh, you made this little noise.
Seriously, I don't remember that. Oh, jeez. Okay.
Yeah. And then we were in, and I loved it, man. I just seeing him sitting down at in that desk in that old fashioned office, being proper chewed out by M. Yeah. Oh man, it was like going back to the olden days. You know, it was, you know. I loved it. I really genuinely loved it. And again, what's tricky about doing these daily episodes where we're talking about one specific thing is I feel the need to go off on a tangent about the entire fucking film, but I can't do that because I've got to stay focused, and I'm finding it really difficult. So all I'm going to say is I loved it. What did you think?
That summed it up pretty well.
Yeah.
I mean, it is everything that we wanted. You know, without going on too much of a tangent, which I'm about to do. Okay. Right. So prior to this film coming out, we were like, we just hope they get it right. You know, the writers, the director, everything like this. You know, Sam Mendes is a Bond fan. He's not just a director. He loves his Bond and he gets it. Daniel's been in the role, you know, since Casino Royale. He knows it. Barbara and Michael obviously been around years. These people know what they're doing. And if you needed any sort of shred of evidence, Spectre, you know, it just is so good. And it just shows that they know what they need to put on the table. That's my digress. Right. I'm back in the room now. Yeah. Okay. So onto the scene with them. Fantastic. Great. What did you think about the part that obviously the whole pre-title sequence, Bond's mission in Mexico, he'd gone rogue, basically, hadn't he? So he'd done that mission without any authority, without the current M knowing or anyone else. So what do you think about that?
Well, that part, he's pretty much gone rogue in every film. Every Daniel film, he's just fucked off and done whatever he wanted.
I think, yeah.
So, you know, there's the whole thing in Casino where M's like, you know, they find out he's in the Bahamas and you know, Quantum, there's the whole thing where they stop his credit card so he can't travel. You know, Skyfall, he does a bit of rogue action, doesn't he? Because obviously everybody thinks he's dead, and all that kind of stuff. And then, yeah, so we have it happen again, which, I don't know, I suppose it works, doesn't it? Because it's Bond and he's supposed to be this rebel, sort of rebellious character who does whatever he wants. So there's that, but I do any excuse for M to tell him off, and I'm happy to support it at the end of the day. So I'm not really that bothered about it. I remember seeing on a forum earlier, somebody was like, oh, you should try a different story because he's gone rogue every time. I don't really care if he goes rogue or not. Do you know what I mean? Having him sort of chew him out. And there's that sort of bit where, okay, he slaps down the newspapers. What were you doing there? And he's like, oh, it's just a coincidence. And then there's that sort of thing in his eye where he's like, all right, okay, you're grounded, kind of thing, you know? And
I love that.
Yeah, and it was like, he knows what's going on. He's not suffering any fools. He knows Bond's bullshitting him. And he's like, okay, that's the game you're going to play, right? Here's the punishment kind of thing. And I loved that. I really did. I remember reading obviously we're going to do an in-depth comparison, but I remember reading in the leak script that conversation was very different. So far I've got through, and the set piece scenes are pretty much the same, but it's what, you know, a lot of the dialogue is different than some of the other things. And Bond was very lippy in the leaked script, and I didn't like it. I was like, Bond wouldn't say that to him. He's got too much respect. So I'm glad they kind of brought that back.
That is good.
And the lippiest he gets is when he's like, you know, you do have a tough day ahead, sir. You know what I mean? And all
could
that.
Could he be the next Count Lippy?
Oh, maybe you could. I like what you did there. Yeah, good stuff. But yeah, I think I dreamed that this would be the opening scene of the film, and there it is. It was served up on a golden platter, and I love them for it.
It's good. It's like overdue holiday, my ass. And I love the fact that the whole him saying, right, you're grounded. It's just like a parent with a child, isn't it? Yeah. It's like, right, you're grounded. You're not going in. That's it. You're back at home. You get up to your room, Bond. You know, stay there. You're not coming down until until dinner's ready or whatever. Yeah. And I really like that. But the cool thing is in this scene, we've got that kind of, you know, a little bit of conflict, but it's kind of, you know, friendly conflict behind it. But then someone comes in and right away we know, right, this guy is going to be a complete and utter prick.
Yeah.
And obviously we get to see Max Denby, who comes in. M kind of mentions who he is, and he's sort of the head of security. He comes in, and straight away he's like the antagonist with Bond. He basically, tells Bond his door is open for his employees. I'm the boss of you. Straight away he's under him, and I really like that. And
well,
that
sounds lovely.
Yeah, Craig's awesome in this bit, and I really like how Bond reacts to him there. So now here's a question. Why does Bond call Denby C?
I have no idea. I've struggled with that. And he was like, I suppose I should call you C, as if there's a reason for it. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, maybe I just missed something in the conversation. Maybe I was
he's the head of the Central National Surveillance or whatever it is. It's a CNS, isn't it?
Yeah. Centre of National Security, maybe?
Yes, something like that. So perhaps that's why, but it still doesn't. The reason I think it is basically the same reason why Christmas Jones was called Christmas Jones, is because there's a line later on in the film and there's a payoff and it works. And in this film, it works unbelievably. It's so good.
Didn't the Royal Albert Hall cheer at that moment when
everyone loved it. Everyone. In fact, every other viewing that I've been to, the whole audience has pissed themselves at it. They've absolutely loved it. But off the top of my head, I can't think of any sort of other reason why he might have been called C. Aside from maybe,
the thing with that joke, the payoff later, it's brilliant. I love it. He's like, oh, that's what M stands for. Moron goes to shoot him. He's got the bullets. We all know what C stands for. And then obviously there's the pause. Everybody laughs. Careless. I wish he'd have just said cunt.
It would have been different.
Yeah, we probably wouldn't have got the 12A rating in the UK if that had been the case.
That's true. Yeah. That's true.
But of course, M couldn't say that word. It would be too naughty for him.
Yeah. But a great first scene, isn't it? So we've got Bond and M back. We see a new antagonist. Brilliant. So the next time we see M is when he's with Denby and Tanner in Tokyo. Now, we already know from what Denby's mentioned that basically they're trying to do this national security, getting like 9 different countries together, merge their security systems. It'll be better for everyone, so to speak. You can tell M's not up for it. He thinks this is stupidity beyond belief. And Tanner's with him. So they're basically in this sort of conference in Tokyo. And there's a vote goes down. And basically you can see M must have known beforehand because he's looking at the South African monitor. Now, whether that was only because it was the closest one to him or whether he had an idea that they might not be up for it. But he was watching that, wasn't he? And they were the only country that said no. So do you think he had he kind of knew they'd say no beforehand? What do you think?
I don't know, because he's sat in the back row, isn't he? So he's got a good view of what everybody else is doing. So I would just imagine that he's sort of eyeballing everybody subtly. And that was obviously the one that he noticed because it's a big green or a big red button. But yeah, so I suppose there's some parallels here, isn't there? In the sense that a lot of people said obviously Skyfall was like very influenced by the Christopher Nolan Batman series, and I can definitely see some parallels with that. But there's also there's something here with the storyline in the sense that it's this mass surveillance thing, and there's that scene. I think it was in the last of the Dark Knight ones where Bond basically, Batman has that sort of scanner sonar thing that can listen in on everybody. And Morgan Freeman's like, this is too much power for one man. If you use this, I'm not going to work with you anymore, kind of thing, and leaves. That's sort of parallel, isn't it? It's just mass surveillance on everybody. And there's a scene later, isn't there, where C plays him the clip of Moneypenny helping Bond, and he's like, rather than being angry that Moneypenny's done that, he's like, he's more angry that he's surveilling the MI6 agents,
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we'll come to that in a moment.
Absolutely. We will. Yeah.
So in this scene it's quite interesting because while Tanner's with them, he gets a message with a little photo of the DB5 sort of splashing into the Tiber and basically sends it to M saying, is Bond in London? Do we know if Bond's in London? And then we cut to M ringing Q, basically saying 007 better be in London, or you're in deep water, so to speak. And you can see Q shitting it when he's on the phone, and he's like, yes, I'll just put a track on him now. He actually
says deep shit, doesn't he?
Does he?
Yeah, I think he says deep shit. Yeah,
there we go. Deep shit even. There we go. And that's quite a cool little scene, and obviously we'll talk about Q in another episode. But so M, you know, first of all, Bond's just gone rogue in Mexico City. Now he can't keep control of him, can he? Because now he's off. He doesn't know where he is, but he doesn't think he's in London. He's probably off in Rome somewhere. So yeah, he's a difficult person he's like the problem child. If you were a teacher, he's that problem child at the back of the class who like disappears, hides under the desk or comes in late and all that, isn't he, Bond?
Yeah,
he's like
absolutely.
One of those.
Doesn't play by the rules, for sure. But I think, if I remember correctly, because it's difficult, isn't it, when you don't have a copy of the film to sort of check through when we plan these episodes, it's difficult to be like, shit, I can't remember that one bit. But I think when Q checks his laptop, it shows that he's in Austria. I think that's just right, the bit before he goes to Mr. White. So that's where he's off to.
But he tells him it's in Chelsea, doesn't he?
Yeah, which is nice. But just going briefly back to the original office scene where he's chewing him out, I do like that bit where he says to him, whatever you're up to has to stop. You know what I mean? Because he obviously, he gives Bond credit. He knows Bond's his best man. So he knows Bond's up to something. And he's like, I can't have you doing this. Yeah. But there's just that sort of, I don't know, in saying that, I feel like he's sort of respecting Bond in the sense that, like, look, I know you're doing something, whatever it is, and I'm sure it's a good reason, but I can't have you running around like this, you know.
Exactly.
Which is nice, yeah.
That is cool. I think M knows that the more it goes on, the harder. Well, he mentions it, doesn't he? The harder it's going to be for the whole 00 section. They're already asking, you know, questions, and with the whole Mexico City job, he knows his job's going to be tougher in terms of keeping the whole section going. And if Bond keeps doing this, he's endangering like M and Bond himself. So yeah, it's a good point. So the next thing then, next time we see M after sort of the speaking to Q, is he's with C again, and they're walking up the spiral sort of stairs in the CNS building, which is a great building. I think visually it's great. You know, lots of glass, very airy. It's kind of very modernistic, isn't it? It looks a cool building. And basically, M initially thinks that it's been paid for by the government, and it's the government that want to do this national surveillance. But obviously, Denby corrects him, saying no, it's paid by private benefactors. You know, so straight, like, we know now who those private benefactors are, or rather is. But back then, obviously, we didn't quite know upon the first viewing. So that's quite good, isn't it? Because it sort of links in that. But then I think they go to C's office, and there's a great line when they're talking about surveillance, and M's basically saying that, you know, surveillance is a dangerous game. Not everything should have surveillance. And C's like, well, you know, it's a way of the future. Look how much we could do with this compared to one man out in the field, sort of thing. And there's a great bit where M is explaining that a license to kill is also a license not to kill. Yeah. And I love that line. I think that's really, really good, isn't it? And it's sort of tells you all you need to know about the 00 section.
Yeah, that's the voice of experience of a man in the field talking right there, isn't it? Which is good. Because I guess there's a similar theme here, isn't there, in the sense of there was the whole thing about Bond being washed up in Skyfall and Q saying to him, I can do more damage in my pajamas, you know, before you've had breakfast, or whatever the quote is. I can't remember what he says now.
A couple of Earl Grey.
Yeah, but yeah, absolutely. So, and there's the same sort of idea as here, you know, mass surveillance. We don't even need the 00s anymore. So it's interesting to kind of see that played out. And of course, you're always going to need the man in the field. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And I think there's, going slightly off topic, there's that whole thing of obviously with the gadgets with Bond, isn't there, of how dangerous that can be, of it becoming too fantastical. Or on the other side of the coin is the fact that, you know, if this was 1990 and Bond pulls out an iPhone in 1990 and does this cool stuff, we'd have all been like, whoa. But everyone's got a rad phone these days, so who gives a shit? You know what I mean? Yeah. So I like the fact that Bond is almost not a technological kind of guy. He's not bringing out all these little gadgets and gizmos left, right, and center. He's got a watch that explodes. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And I like the fact that that's almost like him making a stand against this new world where, like, you're not applicable anymore. You're just this blunt instrument. All of this technology and mass surveillance is the future. And the very fact that he's not running around with all these silly gadgets sort of reinforces how much you need him, because you're always going to need that man in the field, and he can do stuff that whatever technology you end up creating, he's going to be able to he's going to be more powerful than that technology.
Yeah,
that was a roundabout way of saying it. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, no, it did. No, honestly,
yeah.
And I think that's looking at kind of, it's almost like the mechanical versus the electronic world, isn't it?
Yeah,
the mechanical is purely only driven by sort of human. Well, not human. Well, I don't want to get into the whole, artificial intelligence or something like that. But basically, if you can push a finger and do something or whatever, then it's a lot better than just letting a computer do it, kind of thing. I suppose is part of the way. But no, that was a really valid point, I think, and then it puts Bond in his own sort of world, doesn't he? Outside of what's going on the larger picture, which is cool because obviously that's what we like and that's what we do.
We certainly do.
So then, in this same scene, is the bit that you mentioned earlier, where basically C's like, "Oh, I didn't want to do this," and then he basically plays the clip of Bond and Moneypenny talking about the Pale King and trying to find out about Oberhausen and stuff like that, and M's like, You do surveillance on MI6 agents, and he obviously didn't know that was taking place, and we spy on everyone or whatever he says. So that's quite good.
Yeah, I like the way there's that old school loyalty there, isn't it? It's kind of like, I feel like, okay, so he's heard Moneypenny's helping Bond out there. She's gone behind his back, and just before I forget. One scene I've been waiting to talk to you about is that very brief scene where Bond sends Moneypenny the phone in the little gift box, and M walks in and he goes, "What's that?" And she's like, "Oh, it's a gift from an admirer." Puts it away in a drawer. And he's like, "Is it your birthday?" "No, sir." And he's like, "Oh, okay." Goes through the door and he goes, and she's like, "That was last week."
That is so good.
It's such a small scene, man. But that paints him as M more than anything else to me. That scene, that to me is like the classic Bernard Lee with Lois Maxwell. What would I do without you, Moneypenny? Do you know what I mean? That sort of thing. I love that scene. It's so small. It's so insignificant to the main plot, but it paints those two characters and their relationship fucking perfectly, and I loved it.
I'm so glad you brought that up because it's brilliant. I love it as well, and it's just you learn so much from M's character just by those couple of little lines, don't you? But yeah, I think it's great. I love that scene as well. I'm well remembered, man. That scene is awesome. I love that bit.
I bloody love it.
M rocks and Moneypenny rocks too.
I love him so much. Ralph Fiennes as M. I think he's brilliant. Now, one of the most important parts in any Bond film, Chris, is the Michael G. Wilson cameo.
Ooh.
Now, I didn't spot him at first. I didn't spot him in the second viewing either. But I know you pointed him out to me, and I just, by the time I'd looked and realised what you were pointing out, he'd gone. It is that quick. It's a proper blink and you miss it. It's not like a Quantum where he's sitting there reading the newspaper and you've got time to go, "Oh, look, there he is." This one, he's there and gone, like in a matter of moments. So tell the people where he is, Chris, if you haven't spotted him already.
Okay, so this is the second sort of meeting that, M and I think Moneypenny is with her. Is it just M? I'm not sure, but I think it's just M. But he goes to see C. They've basically the whole Nine Eyes sort of thing with South Africa. They've decided to join, and Denby is about to tell M that it's all going ahead. But just as M's approaching Denby's chatting to someone very briefly, and that someone is Michael G. Wilson.
There he is,
and you just see a glimpse of them chatting, and then you cut to M, you cut back, and he walks off as M arrives. It's very, very quick, but I love those bits. I love just Michael G. Wilson. I just hope he goes on forever and just like populates.
Me too. It just populates the world with little baby Michael G's. So I think the scene you got, because you have to be ready to catch him before it happens, because by the time it is so quick you will miss him straight away. So I think, if I remember right, it's in the scenes where Bond and Léa Seydoux are in L'Américaine. He smashes through the wall and does that. It's the scene immediately after that.
Yes.
So keep your eye out for that after he's looked at the Vesper tape and all that. When it cuts back to London, he's on screen almost immediately. It's that blink and you'll miss him. But that's where he is. A very sneaky one this time. Very short, sharp and brief. But good to see him, absolutely. I hope there'll be many more Michael G cameos. But there we go. I also love it in that sequence where C says to him, This is the future and you're just not. And I love it, Chris, when M goes to him, you're a cocky little shit, aren't you? I love that, man. No, taking no shit, just laying it down. And I love that. I really do.
Yeah, equally, I think Andrew Scott is awesome as Denby because you hate him so easily.
Yeah.
The way he the way he says that line, and you're not, and the way also that when M sort of says to him, "This isn't over," and he walks off, and then Moneypenny gives him a glare and walks off, and the way Denby just kind of casually looks down and then looks back up at them and is almost like so not bothered by it. Yeah. You can tell he just doesn't care. And
you could have, do you know what? You could have played that character so differently. You could have been like the cliche sort of slick back hair kind of salesman type. Do you know what I mean? And been really sleazy about it. But he's almost very businesslike in the way he does it. Do you know what I mean? He's very professional and he doesn't sort of lord it over them too much. It's like a subtle dig every time, that line about, for my employees, it's such a subtle dig. It's not like an overt attack. It's just a subtle letting you know I'm the boss, and it's the same thing with it. And that's the scene where he says, I didn't want to have to do this, but and I love the way he plays it, man. I think he was a perfect choice for Denby without a doubt.
Really good, yeah. And I did think maybe would he be a character you'd want to stay on, but I guess he's done and dusted in this film. Obviously, we'll talk about that in a bit. But yeah, Andrew Scott, brilliant. So what's the next? So the next scene, I think. Do you remember the next scene?
This bit, I believe, the next time we see him is when he's sitting in the restaurant in Rules. Which
we've got to go there. We've got to go there. I know. Some of the other JBR listeners went, didn't they? I think Marcus and one or two of the others. I think Morgan might have gone and had lunch or a drink there. So we've got to do that, man. Next time we're in London,
the M table is there underneath.
Everyone's going to want the M table, aren't they? It's going to be like, I want that one.
But apparently, Rules is London's oldest restaurant, so it's worth a visit, even for that reason alone, rather than it being the Bond location. But I tell you, what I like about this is the whole thing of, it's Q and Moneypenny go to meet. Is it Q and Moneypenny or is it Tanner?
No, it's Q and Moneypenny.
It's Q and Moneypenny. Okay. Yeah. So there's M. He's having dinner. It's obviously late at night. In Rules, they come and say, we've got to help Bond, and they've got the top-down view of the sort of hollowed-out crater thing that Blofeld's base is. I like that. And then I love the way he's businesslike about it, and he says basically we can't help him because if we can track him, then so can they. Basically, so if we help him, we make him weaker. We've just got to let him do his thing, and I think that's a brilliant M-like response to that, because at the end of the day, for example, if you're the captain of a ship, for example, and you have to send men to their deaths in order to preserve your vessel, for example, then that's a very tough decision, and that's something that they have to be comfortable with. Be like, I've got to give these guys these orders. If they don't, if they die, then they're going to save the whole ship. Yeah. If I don't make this order, everyone's going to die, and that's a very interesting area of like ethics to debate, isn't it? Of like, what do you do in that situation? And to me, that's like a parallel of that kind of idea, in the sense that he's like, I'd love to help Bond, but we're just going to weaken him. He's on his own. He's got to do this by himself. And I think that's a brilliant, commanding sort of response to that. What do you think?
No, definitely. And also, in a way, it shows how much he knows Bond's ability. If anyone has to be on their own, let it be Bond, sort of thing, because he what he's capable of. M knows, like you said, he's his best man, he's his best agent, and he's going to be on his own. If he dies, he dies, but there's a chance that maybe he won't. But he can't. If they did help him, then that would, he tells Q to destroy the smart blood, doesn't he? Because the smart blood, so he tells him to get rid of that. It's safer for Bond to be on his own, so that's like the best thing to do. But no, I think that's a really strong moment. That definitely.
Yeah.
And I guess because Q and Moneypenny were probably thinking to themselves, "Well, hang on a minute, you're not helping Bond."
Yeah.
M's like, no, this is what we have to do, and that is really cool. I've got a question for you about M.
Go on.
Okay, so we'll go into it obviously in other podcasts, but we see a bit of Moneypenny in her social time. We see a little bit of Q per se, or at least hear a bit about Q in his social time. Now M, okay, we see him, he's having dinner in a restaurant by himself. Outside of being M, the head of MI6, what do you think his life entails? Do you think he's like 7 in the morning until 2 in the morning? That's his whole time doing MI6, or do you think there's anything outside of that? Obviously, in Majesties, we found the lepidopterology, you know, the butterfly studying. What do you think this M has? Do you think he has anything, or what do you think his social time would be?
That is a very interesting question, actually. You know, because obviously you had Miles messaging with Quarterdeck, didn't you, and all that kind of stuff, and you had those brief glimpses into M's world in the books, and obviously in some of the films as well. You see that. This M, I think you don't become M unless you're 100% dedicated to the job in hand. That comes first above all and anything. And if you're a military commander type, then that is what life is. I can't see him having a wife. I can't see him, or if he does, they were divorced long ago, because he was just so dedicated to his job, you know. I feel like he's got a very sort of regal apartment somewhere in Westminster that he goes to that's got lots of mahogany on the walls and stuff, and leather-bound books like Ron Burgundy, that kind of a house. And
do you think he's got a goldfish called James?
Maybe that's his one little thing. Maybe he's got a goldfish. But yeah, I can't see him having any hobbies or interests outside his work. I feel like he lives and breathes it to the bone every day. Yeah.
I think he'd read books about secret agents and military and all that sort of stuff.
Do you know what? He would read books about military strategy in old battles. He'd be reading about Waterloo and stuff, I would imagine.
And then thinking what he would have done in that position. Probably.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's a very good question. So also, obviously, we have a glimpse of M, don't we, when we're in sort of Blofeld's control room with all the TV banks, and we see him sort of, obviously the 00 section have been disbanded, and M's giving like the speech of, you know, perhaps it's the destiny that all spies should just sort of dissolve into nothingness, or that's a bad quote, but whatever it is, something he says, like that, something along those lines, and all that kind of stuff, and I think we're sort of by this point, obviously, after, you know, Bond escapes from Blofeld and goes back to London, and they all head to the Hildebrand safe house. Lovely nod to the books, man. Lovely nod. And do you know what else I noticed as well? When the light catches it, it's got Hildebrand in big writing, and then underneath, I think it says books and rarities.
I think it does.
Which is something in rarities. It definitely says rarities. I don't know what the first word is, but I think it's books and rarities. And I thought, oh man, that's such a lovely little nod. I love it. And again, that shows to me, like you were saying, about how they know what they're doing with these films. Do you know what I mean?
Definitely.
That to me is a perfect nod to that, you know. It really is. Anyway, Hildebrand safe house. I love the fact Hugh says, oh, I've never heard of it, and he's like, well, that's why it's a safe house, you know. It's that safe that not even you know about it, you know. So there's that little exchange. So this is really the first time, there's a touch of it in Skyfall, the first time we ever see M sort of out in the field actually taking action, and he's right there alongside Bond, isn't he? He's like, right, we've got to go and shut this down, which is interesting, because when I heard the sort of the talk that M's gonna, you know, he's not gonna just be behind a desk, this M, I was like, oh man, that's such a touchy area, because you don't want to see M running around with machine guns helping Bond and being like on a mission with him. That's just not what you want. But the way they played that out in this film, I think, was perfect. He's a man that is capable of getting stuck in when he needs to, but he's still the proper M. Do you know what I mean? He's not Superman M.
No, definitely not. I love the bit, like when they go into the safe house and they're like, how do we know it's safe? And he opens the door, sees Bond, he's like, it's safe. And that's really cool. I like that. I love the fact it's just opposite Trafalgar Square as well. Trafalgar Square is there, and like Hugh has never heard of it, but there it is, which is quite good. And then obviously they go inside, and then Bond basically tells him, M meets Swan as well, doesn't he? And then Bond tells him about sort of Spectre and how it's all linked and stuff like that, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Which is cool. But yeah, then we get the scene. So we got two cars, and so we've got Bond. Oh no, yeah. So we've got Bond and M in one car, and then Moneypenny, Q, and Tanner in the other. But if we concentrate on M, I do like the bit where they're obviously bombing along. But I love the fact that it's Bond and M in the car as well. You know, it could have been any sort of number of possibilities between those five characters, but Bond and M were alone in one car, and I think that's cool. I really like that. I don't know why. I don't know why, but I just like it a lot. And it gets to that point where basically they're bombing along, and this sort of Jeep thing just rams it into the wall out of nowhere. And I heard so many people sort of jump. And at subsequent viewings, everyone's kind of, you know...
That was a really nice touch, you know, because there were several points in this film where I was locked in and I thought, okay, I know what to expect now. I know what's coming up. And I just thought they were going to get in those cars, go to the CNS building, and then start the assault on that. And that was just a nice little twist just to throw in and be like, oh, little spanner in the works there. Ultimately, it was the same thing. You know, it led him to where... Well, obviously they take him to the MI6 building, don't they? But it was like led him to that area of where he was going to go anyway. But it was just a cool way of doing it in a different way that you didn't quite expect, you know?
Yeah. And it also got us another opportunity to see M doing some cool shit again. Like the fact that Bond gets kidnapped, doesn't he, and taken away, and by the time they come back to the car, M's gone, and then you see him hiding around the corner, you know, ready for action, and you can tell his adrenaline's pumping. And I like that. I like to see sort of, you know, back in the game, as it were.
Absolutely. Just those little glimpses of what he's capable of from his past life before he had the desk job, you know. That's a nice little touch. So then obviously we've got now this is an interesting scene, this next bit. Obviously we cut to the CNS building. We see Denby returning to his office, and he's trying to log in, and it's, you know, he's locked out of his account. Now, this scene is very much like the scene at the beginning of Casino, where Bond and Dryden do the little thing where I know where you keep your gun and all that kind of stuff. It's the same thing, you know?
It is, exactly.
Denby picks up the gun, tries to shoot him. M's got the bullets in his hand. And, you know, there's that exchange we just talked about. You know, we know what M stands for, moron. We know what C stands for. You know what C stands for, careless, you know. And he's got all the bullets. Q's there in the background doing all the business, which is interesting. Why do you think they did that? 'Cause obviously they're conscious of it. They're not going to have done that by accident, you know?
No, of course not. I guess maybe they are doing nods to the past. I know Casino Royale is pretty recent. Maybe that's just a little one that they squeezed in for Casino. I mean, the line, it works so well with that line. That line, no matter what happens, like, no matter why Bond called CC, anything like that, that line is such a good payoff that, you know, everything around that almost, you know, it doesn't kind of matter too much. But I think it was a nod, but also I guess it showed that M had the same mindset as Bond when it comes to those sort of things.
Maybe it's a hint that this M essentially was like Bond in his younger days, you know?
Yeah, that's a good shout. That's a really good shout. And why not? You know, he was from that similar sort of background, wasn't he? And he's obviously had the experience. I think there's definitely that link that him and Bond, they know how to handle the same situation. You know, they've got the same sort of skill set. Obviously, Bond's at his peak, and M's not. But M's, you know, he's got it upstairs, and and I think that was really good. Do you know what though? All these people with their guns, they've got to find better places, haven't they, to hide them? It's like keep them in their top desk and stuff like that. They've got to find somewhere a little bit more, a little bit wiser, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not sure, but it's a great scene, and I love the way that M's like, you know, Denby tries to log on and he can't get access, and then M's like, he goes, you better not be responsible for this. And he's like, no, it's not me, it's my quartermaster. And he's just basically shutting you down. And then you see Q sort of beavering away. That's really nice. And then I think Denby says about the whole, you're both out of a job. And then basically I think that's when he gets a gun then. But yeah, really, really good scene, isn't it? Really good scene. I like
absolutely, And there's what I like as well is obviously when it cuts back, we've got M's got the gun, it's loaded, he's got Denby at gunpoint. And then obviously there's the struggle, which they do show briefly in the first full trailer. I remember it's like basically it was a blink and you miss it when you see them wrestling with the gun, pulling the trigger and shooting the glass sort of barrier.
Cool.
And I remember seeing that and slowing it down and watching it. It was like,
what did you think when you saw that first time round then?
So I was like, who is that? That's M like in action with the gun. And then so I went back and slowed it right down, saw it was Denby, and I was like, shit. And immediately I thought, I wish I hadn't seen it. And I thought, to be honest, That's nothing I didn't expect anyway. I knew Denby was. We said that was our speculation, wasn't it? It's like Denby is going to be working against Bond and M within the government to try and shut them down. Like we saw that one coming, so that I wasn't really pissed off about that. No. But then so they have the little struggle. It shows M's not a weakling; he can handle himself with a much younger man in a fight. And then obviously Denby loses his footing, falls to his death. How do you feel about that? Is that a fitting end to Max Denby?
Yeah, I think so. What I really appreciated about that scene was, well, it was quite cool because they're struggling. It's kind of even. Then the helicopter appears and Denby almost overcomes M. But M manages to just maneuver it. You see Denby's on the edge, almost a bit like, Shandor in Spy before he grabs Roger's tie, before he grabs Bond's tie. It's a bit like that. And you see him fall. But what I was really happy they didn't do is, if it had been Die Another Day, the camera would have basically followed him over the top and watched him drop in this CGI mess, and they didn't do that, which I was really appreciated. So you saw him fall, and then M walks across and he looks down and you see him on the CNS logo on the floor, which is nice, of glass all around him, and he's obviously dead. And I think that worked fine. In terms of, did you have any alternate ways that he could potentially die, or what did you think?
Not really. I think that's a good way for him to go. I think what I was going to say is we do get one of those CGI shots, don't we, with Bond and Léa Seydoux at the end when they jump out of their building and land on the big net, and that does have that tacky sort of CGI vibe about it. It doesn't bother me a great deal. I feel like something could perhaps have been done a bit better on that and made it a real jump of some description. I don't know.
I'm sure you could do a real jump, at least similar to it, sort of thing. Yeah.
But yeah, I like the fact that you just see him sort of lose his footing, then it cuts away. Next time you see him, you just see him on the floor, on the logo, which is a nice little touch. We always like to see the baddies hoist by their own petard at the end, don't we? So it's like, the building that was the center of everything is ultimately what kills him, and right there on the logo as well. I think that was a nice little touch, a nice fitting end to Denby. Now, what I will say, man, is I love the MI6 crew these days. You know how I said ages ago, I think it's when we reviewed Spy, how seeing, Robert Brown and like
Jeffrey Keane,
and
Desmond Llewellyn,
just that whole MI6 crew it's comforting to see them. You feel like you're around old friends when you see those guys again. Obviously we've been watching these films since we were kids, and to see them, it's like, it's like almost seeing family members or something. This kind of crew, the MI6 crew, Ray Fiennes, you've got Bill Tanner, you've got Moneypenny and Q, and that whole kind of group. I love them, man. I think they're all brilliant, and they give me that same sort of feeling that those old school kind of MI6 people do. What do you think?
For me, I think it could possibly, the classic is obviously Bernard Lee, Lois Maxwell, Desmond Llewellyn, and you're not really going to top that by any means. But I think with Rafe, with Ben Whishaw, who's awesome, Naomi Harris, who's absolutely awesome, Rory Kinnear as well. I love, maybe Tanner, you'd never really see him on a scene by himself, but M, Q, or Moneypenny that we've got, you could happily see a scene with just them, and you'd get something out of it. They're that good. But when you do see them together, and four of them with Tanner as well, it is like it is Bond's family, basically, isn't he? He hasn't got a family. His family, M's his dad, Q's is like kind of little brother, I guess. Naomi's his sister, and Tanner's like his uncle or something, and that's kind of like his family, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it works so well, it really does. And I think the casting decisions for those four particular characters have been absolutely 100% spot on, and you could not improve on what they've got now. I don't think you could anyway. I think they're all absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I think they're brilliant too. I really do. I think that they all bring something new to their roles whilst fully respecting what came before them, and I just love them for it. And they all work well together as well. They all work as a team, not just in terms of a storyline, but just as the actors together, they just seem to fit nicely together.
They gel, don't they?
Yeah, they really do. And that scene, like I say, where M just walks through and he's like, "Is it your birthday? It's not your birthday, is it?" Or whatever. And like the way he looks a little bit irritated. He's like, "It's not your birthday, is it?" Like, I fucking love that scene so much. And it's like the first time we've seen the M and Moneypenny thing working together, just like Lois Maxwell and Bernard Lee would have done way back in the day, you know, like when M would press the intercom and be like, you know, forgive the usual pleasantries, Moneypenny, 007's got a job to do, or whatever it is, skip the usual pleasantries or whatever he says, you know. That to me is just like a little hint of that relationship, which is brilliant. And
I hope we see one or two more. I'm sure we will. This is all, you know, it all means they just know what's going on, and I'm loving it.
They've got it so right,
so
absolutely. So I suppose the sort of final glimpse of M we see this time around is on the bridge. Obviously, Blofeld's chopper is kind of crashed.
Well, just before that, the MI6 building sort of is demolished, and he thinks, and 007 is inside, isn't he?
Yeah.
But just as it's collapsing, he's with the other MI6 lot, and then he just sees a speedboat with Bond and Swan pull out. So he knows they're safe. He obviously watches them go away. But there is that moment where he's watching it crumble, thinking, bloody hell, Bond's in there, sort of thing. So So, and then obviously it cuts to the bridge then.
Absolutely. So it's kind of after Bond, there's that thing where Bond's about to shoot Blofeld or whatever, and in my mind, I was going, please don't shoot him. Please don't shoot him. If he'd have shot Blofeld at the end of the film, I'd have been gutted. I'd have been so gutted.
I don't think they could have done.
Nah, they couldn't have done. But so basically, Bond walks away, and it's M that goes up to him and says, you know, on the behalf of the British government, you're being detained. Blofeld doesn't say a word. He just kind of looks away. And that's the last we see of him in this film.
What do you think of the bit where M's... Basically, he crosses the police guard and he's like, stand down. And the guard isn't going to let him through initially. And he's like, you know, head of the 00 program, stand down sort of thing.
Yeah.
And you can see the policeman isn't 100% sure, but obviously M's insistent. And he's like, right, basically, get out of my bloody way. Yeah. Now, here's an interesting point. I don't know if we should save this for speculation or not. Shall I go for it?
Go on, go for it. Bring it out the bag.
This is one of our listeners basically brought this one up, and I'll remember and I'll quote him next time. But basically, could the time that you've got from the helicopter sort of crashing, to the police turning up is like that? Okay. Yeah. Now, M's obviously not on the side of the police at the moment because they didn't let him through.
Yeah.
What is a possibility that the police were actually part of SPECTRE, and when potentially, if Blofeld is being detained, those police are on his side?
Almost like the Fran Sanchez escape in License to Kill, in that sense that, you know, Killiffer's an inside man. Maybe those coppers are inside working with SPECTRE as an escape route for Blofeld. It's a possibility. I feel like if that is the case, and that's what happens in the pre-titles of Bond 25, for example, I feel like that would be...
It's a weaker version of what could happen.
Yeah, I feel like that would just sort of cheapen the end of this film a little bit and make Bond out to be a bit of a fool, I think. I don't know, I'm not sure about that, to be honest.
No.
I think Spectre is one of those movies where there are little details like that you just go with. For example, the plane... when he's chasing the, you know, Hinks from the Hoffler Clinic, just kind of shows up out of the blue. For me, I feel like you could have explained that by one shot of Bond comes out of the clinic, he shoots the guy, shoots the other guy, and then sees the cars going off. And then all you needed to do would be show a shot of a plane that's just arrived sitting on the runway and Bond looking at it.
You do see that, but you see it when he first arrives.
Yeah, but I feel like to make that obvious, because several people now have said, where did he get the plane from? It's just come out of the blue. So I feel like you would have just needed that one shot of like some dude climbing out of the plane and walking away and Bond just looking at it with the door open, and that would have been all you needed.
Yeah. It's funny because they do trim. It's a fine balance between shoving something in someone's face too much to not showing them anything at all. Yeah. You don't want either extreme if you can do it. But I know in the past we have had a lot of, you know, guess what's about to happen? Yeah. And we're going to basically tell you without you having to use your brain to work it out. And I know it's a bit different in this scene. And we do see the plane initially, so it's not so bad. It's more of a very subtle sort of thing when you first see it. But I do agree, if they had another sort of very short clip, then that would have been something. But in a way, you did see the airstrip when he first arrived, so I'm not as as against it as, but I can understand why some people might.
But that's a long way around of saying, I think the police showing up in a split second is just one of those things that in this movie, that's just kind of what happens in this world, and that the police are right there. And at the end of the day, they're right there next to the Houses of Parliament. There's going to be police. You know, David Cameron lives down the road. Yeah. There's going to be police right on that doorstep.
Plus the whole commotion. They probably would have seen the helicopter hovering outside the old MO6 building, wondering, well, it's not one of ours. Who the hell's that? Yeah. Get the police there now. So I think the police would have been there.
Demolition would have happened earlier than planned as well. So all of a sudden this building exploding would have raised some alarm, you know. So
I think the police would have been there. So I think that's fine. I think there's no problem. I think, obviously, the policeman just not letting him go is just basically him still under orders of Denby, thinking that the 007 program is dead, and you know, you haven't got any authority until M obviously shows him the other way around. So obviously M then goes across the Blofeld and says, right, on behalf of this government, you're being detained. And then basically he looks at Bond as Bond walks off, and that is the last we see of M then. Yeah. So overall, what are your thoughts of M in Spectre?
I fucking adore him. I love him. I love him hard, deep and long.
Sounds good.
What do you think?
Get a room for you guys. No, I think he's amazing. I think it's hard to say. It's hard to compare all the M's or whatever. I mean, Bernard's classic. Judi Dench was amazing. Robert Brown is probably the weaker of the M's, but I think Mallory stands level with Judy's M, and Bernard's M, I suppose, might just be the crown, just because it's so hard to top that. I think
Bernard is perfect. I don't think you can beat Bernard.
You can't. So you for
me, it's tricky. I love Judi, but it's a Judi different relationship. It's different, you know. The only time we've ever seen Judi act like the original M from the books is in GoldenEye, when she chews him out for being a relic of the Cold War and all that kind of stuff, you know. That's where she's taking charge and showing Bond who's boss. Other than that, it's more of a friendly, almost a motherly relationship, isn't it, after that in the other films? So, yeah, it's a tough one. It's a hard one to rate her against Bernard, because it's such a different relationship. Yeah. But for me, man, I can't think of anybody else who would do a better job than Ralph Fiennes as M. I think he's brilliant. I think he's brilliant. He really is brilliant. I love him. I could talk about him all bloody day.
I'm so glad they got him as well, because he just adds so much class, doesn't he?
He's going to be around for a while as well, man, because M is a small, like, you could shoot all of M scenes in a week probably. Do you know what I mean? It's no big deal.
I see him being around for like
20 years.
Easily Bond 30. Yeah. You know, Bond 30, I think we'll see him too. Oh, imagine that, Bond 30.
Man, I can't wait for him to look old and crusty. Once he starts really greying and looking like a proper old man, he's going to be fucking brilliant. Yeah, he's going to be so good.
Nice. Good stuff.
Right, so that about rounds out today's episode. Like we said, good old Brett Spencer, he's one of our JBR listeners, has been supplying the rather cool graphics, the little sort of banner that goes with each of our daily episodes on 30 Days of Spectre. So shout out to Brett. If you need a graphic designer, get hold of him at brett@brettspencer.com. Give him a shout over there. He's bloody good, and he's a big Bond fan as well. So, you know, it's like we can form a brotherhood of bondage. You know, you need a graphic designer, call Brett. You know, you need something else, call one of our other listeners. That's a great one. That's a great advert. Lovely, cool stuff. Also, don't forget to join us on Facebook. Just put James Bond Radio into the search. Follow us on Twitter, which is @James Bond Radio. Come to jamesbondradio.com and get involved. Leave us some comments on these 30 Days of Spectre posts. Let us know what you think about M, for example. Get involved with the chit chat. And of course, you can leave us some voicemails as well over on jamesbondradio.com. And if you're enjoying the 30 Days of Spectre or any of our episodes, be sure to leave us a lovely glowing 5-star review on iTunes, because that really helps us out too. And subscribe on YouTube as well if you don't already. That's always very nice too. So that is day 4 of the 30 Days of Spectre in the bag. I'm very excited. I thoroughly enjoyed myself today. How did you feel?
Absolutely loved it. Just buzzing. It's hard not to get excited when you're talking about just top quality people.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff. So we're back tomorrow morning as usual. Until then, I've been Tom Sears.
I've been Chris Wright.
And James Bond Radio will return with 30 Days of Spectre, Day 5.
See you in the morning. Bye.